let's say, the pedagogical shell around it available as open educational resources. And it turns out that we run into a legal problem because of the way we are financed. I'm not going to delve too deeply into that, but the interesting thing is that we run into a conflict between the Ministries of Education and the Ministry of Economic Affairs. The Ministry of Education people feel that if we make our resources available also, for instance, for independent and lifelong learning and so on, that they should not pay for that. That should be the Ministry of Economic Affairs, who is in charge of professional development and things like that. So interestingly, these kinds of issues crop up. One should try to challenge or to change the model on which we have been operating so far. And I'm sure other issues like this will start cropping up as well. And this is it, I think, for the moment.
Very nice and a bit of disagreement amongst participants. Excellent. Susan, what are your thoughts?
Clearly, I agree about all the comments with respect to changing the culture. I think that the academic culture obviously doesn't make this easy, but people do need new skills, and if they're going to learn to collaborate, and if they're going to learn to share others' materials and use them, there needs to be some institutional support for this. The other issue that I find quite interesting is that of the learner. There too, learners need to acquire new skills in a sort of an academic digital literacy, if you will, that allows them to engage with material that they find, hopefully, on the web, and to be able to take charge of their own learning. And I'm thinking particularly of the issue of independent learners and promoting lifelong learning in that way. I think that there are barriers there, and one of the perhaps places where we can turn to is the library, and the role of the library in making information available and helping people find and use it effectively. I've noted that there's some rather interesting presentations that will be made at Open Ed on the role of the library, and I think that's going to be most interesting for us because, again, from the position of having looked at lack of awareness as a barrier, we need to look at some of the traditional ways that people seek information and ensure that the people who work in those organizations are part of the open educational practices movement as well. Thanks.
Susan, and I agree. I think libraries have a very important role to play in this, and I think also the development of digital literacy skills is key. When you look at Jenkins's list of 12 digital literacy skills to participate in, which he refers to the participatory culture, it really makes you realise that we've got a long way to go, both in terms of developing these skills for teachers and for learners. Great. Thanks, David, for that link. That's great. That's to John's work at the OU on, at the JISC in terms of the role of libraries in OER. So again, we've finished the second round now, and I'm just going to pause again for a moment to ask any of the team members, Tapio, Thomas, Paul, etc., if you'd like to offer any reflections or additional thoughts on this. If you do, if you can put your hand up and I'll pass you the mic. Thanks. So I'll just pause for a moment. Okay, Ulf, the floor is yours.
Hello, everybody. I hope you can hear me. I hope I'm not too loud. I see the microphone is leveling quite high. Okay. Thank you very much. My name is Ulf Ehlers from the University of Duisburg-Essen. We are coordinating the Open Educational Quality Initiative, the OEQUAL project. Thank you very much to Bronnie for moderating this in an excellent way, and also for preparing this, and everybody who is here for participating and contributing. That's very, very valuable for us, and we will take it very, very seriously to follow up on your excellent comments and remarks. Thank you very much so far. I would like to just make a very quick comment that the discussions we have are focusing on the use of open educational resources and on something which we call in a larger frame open educational practices. To me, open educational practices are also associated with a change of thinking or attitude in teaching and also in learning. No longer the teacher is the only content producer or transmitter, but also, like somebody said before, through user-generated content concepts, for example, learners are becoming content producers and experience transmitters. And this changes a lot, and I think that open educational practices are also concerned with this level of learning processes, and I would just like to throw that for the next question also into the debate. Thank you.
That's really nice. Anybody else from the team want to add a comment or reflection at this point? Okay, if not, then we'll move on to the third question. As I mentioned at the beginning, we gathered over 60 case studies of OER initiatives, including the WikiWise one that Peter mentioned. And the aim there was to really try and isolate the associated practices around the OER. And we developed a set of dimensions of open education practices, which we then refined into 4 main categories. And those are listed under question 3. Strategies and policies around the use of OER. I think we've heard, I think it was Peter, you mentioned that you had an institutional policy in place to do with the OER. So the degree to which there are different kinds of strategies and policies around OER. Barriers and success factors, of course we've just been talking about some of those, but looking at the projects to see what they've learned about what works and what doesn't. Tools and tools practices, so the different kinds of repositories that people are using to store OER, the different associated social networking and communication tools that they've been using. And finally, relating back to Susan's last point, the ways in which people are providing staff development and support through OER initiatives. So I just wanted to reflect again, going down the list, on what your thoughts are on these 4 dimensions. Do they capture the different aspects of OER practice? And is there anything else that we should be including? So again, I'll hand back to Andy.
I think they do cover a lot. Obviously, there are some elements which you might be including in some of the aspects which are not apparent from the title. And the one that strikes me most is about collaboration and cooperation. Yeah, I'm sure we've got some dimensions, as you say there, because it seems for a lot of these things, in terms of a lot of the models and what we've talked about before, and certainly what I've talked about before, in the way that people can do things, that this, one of the potential trends that OER forces is moving away from the thought about the individual creator, the individual teacher producing something and that's it, that there's collaborative and cooperative development, whether it's serial development and somebody produces something and then somebody takes it and does something else with it and develops and builds upon it, or whether people are working together and collaborating in producing and using open education resources for a particular purpose. And I sort of point out something like the Sortessa project as a great example of where they set up models for collaboration and cooperation in terms of creating a core set of materials which can then be adapted and used by the different collaborating partners and consortium partners and things. So I think there's that element, which is, I think you're saying you have got covered underneath this in themes, but it's almost like, I just wonder whether it's a sort of practice in itself. It's the difference between the individual practice as opposed to collective practice that might be involved.
Andy, thanks for that. Hans, what are your thoughts?
My thought is that basically I agree with these 4 dimensions, and I've been mostly working in the third dimensions, tools and tool practices. And there, my view is that when designing tools for open education, we should look at open education as a digital ecosystem. And when we design these tools, always that challenge is to find the compromise between the pedagogical considerations, the technical considerations, and the social considerations like openness. And that's my point.
Thanks, Hans. And I think we can learn a lot, and we saw lots of different examples across the case studies of the way in which people were using tools and these tool practices. Patrick, again, from your experience of both OpenLearn and OLNet, what are your thoughts on these dimensions?
Right, I'll just say that David appears to be skipped out on this, but I'll carry on. But I wouldn't like David to feel that you weren't noticing him. I think that with these dimensions, I feel it does cover it fairly well. But looking at them in terms of what they cover and the way you introduce the policies, I know you've got all these different subcategories, but in a way, there's sort of the big policy impact, the one where it's not so much about whether you have an open education resource policy in the very good sense in which the OU Netherlands has got it, but also whether you can see the way in which it could change the whole area. So I feel that policy in this big sense is now being considered in the advocacy work that the Hewlett Foundation is doing in terms of seeing how open education resource and the way it operates in across boundaries can be used to change the school systems and address the big problems they've got with community colleges. So there's a sort of a big policy issue that I'm not sure you're covering by putting it in that way. I feel that barriers and success factors is also something that's a bit different. And if you were trying to see these as 4 different dimensions, as you put it, barriers and success factors are sort of whatever happens that causes problems in any of these areas. So you maybe could argue you've got 3 different dimensions there, and then you've also got the thing that allows you to record those critical things that actually do happen. I think maybe if we look at your subcategories, we might get the answer to this. But I think as Andy was doing when he was saying about collaboration, sometimes it's not entirely obvious where things sit. So where does this cultural issue that we've been talking about sit in terms of this? What about the financial side? What about the legal side? All of those things, you could always put them in barriers and success factors because everything's likely one or the other. But I do wonder whether if you thought this in terms of the issues we've talked about, I'm not sure I'd find it that easy to know their natural place, which might mean there's some tweaking to be done or something like that. But overall, I'm sure it's a pretty good shot, and I know it's worked for you up to this point. And perhaps now over to say goodbye.
That's some very good critical points there, Patrick. We just started with a larger set of dimensions and then refine them down, particularly because we wanted to link them into our